We are now recording our Zoom session for Anatomy 120. Now, Rebecca Krause and I have emailed each other, and we are a little bit ahead of time in our anatomy, which is good. It's better that way, and that allows us a little bit more time for review. So I'm going to go through the middle ear from where we left off last week. If we get done today for this section, then we get done. If not, no worries, because we are ahead of time and we can finish it perhaps next week. Otherwise, also, next week and the week thereafter, we can do a bit of review and go over some salient points that we all should make sure we know for our midterm exam. I believe midterms are early October, and so we are a little bit ahead of time. Your midterm exam in anatomy will only cover the outer and the middle ears, and so if I do start on some things with the inner ear, no biggie. That means we're ahead of time, but that material will not be covered on the midterm exam. So just kind of setting a few housekeeping things here so we've got them. So we can always now go to share screen, and I'll pull up my good old notes for this particular class. And there we be, middle ear anatomy and physiology. And last week we covered what the middle ear basically consists of: the inner skin of the tympanic membrane, the closed middle ear space, lined with mucus lining and surrounded by porous mastoid bone, the Eustachian tube, closed unless forced open, two middle ear or three middle ear ossicles, malleus, incus, stapes, and their ligaments that hold them in place, and two muscles that comprise the acoustic reflex. That's what we're going to cover today too a bit. So two middle ear muscles, the stapedius muscle attached to the neck of the stapes, and it is innervated or is connected to the seventh cranial nerve, and the other muscle is larger, but it's a weaker muscle. The tensor tympani muscle is attached to the malleus bone, and it is innervated or connects to the fifth cranial nerve, which is often called the trigeminal nerve. So if we show a picture here of what we're talking about, here we have it. External auditory meatus, EAM, or ear canal, eardrum with its three embryologically oriented layers of tissue, the ectoderm on the outside, and the mesoderm and the endoderm. And then you have the malleus, incus, and stapes. You can see some of the ligaments holding this ossicular chain in place. Think of the three ossicles of the middle ear as a unit, the ossicular chain. And take a good note of them too. Look at the shapes, and notice how the shapes. The malleus has two main parts, and then you'll have it has the hammer part and the manubrium. Notice how the manubrium is attached from the top of the eardrum just down to the middle, or the umbo. The incus with its short process, long process. And then the stapes with its neck, its two crura, and then the foot plate of the stapes, which is embedded in what is called the oval window. And the oval window is right here. This is the gateway to the inner ear, the oval window. Then you'll see a bump of bone here called the promontory, and then below that, the round window. When the oval window pushes in, the round window can bulge out. Okay, that's the purpose of the round window, is that it's a layer of membrane that's movable. So when the oval window pushes in, the round window can bulge out. Because what is the inner ear or cochlea filled with? Fluid. Okay? And what is the middle ear space filled with? Air. And it is imperative that the air pressure of the middle ear space has to be equal to the air pressure in the ear canal. If the air pressure is not even Steven, you will not have a fully functioning middle ear. And in children with earaches, this is often the case. They'll start out with negative air pressure inside that middle ear space. And the reason why is because the mucosal lining of the middle ear space is constantly absorbing oxygen. And you'll get a vacuum in the middle ear space, and the eardrum will become sucked inward. Sometimes so much so that the eardrum here will touch the promontory bone. At any rate, the Eustachian tube, the purpose of the Eustachian tube is to allow new air to get into the middle ear space. And the Eustachian tube is closed unless you blow your nose or you swallow or you yawn, and it opens by itself periodically once in a while. But think about this. If you've got negative air pressure in the middle ear space, that Eustachian tube will be sucked closed, and it won't open. Even when you yawn or swallow, it will remain closed because there's negative air pressure here, which is creating a vacuum. And when you've created a vacuum, you have made the Eustachian tube tighter and more closed. And that just leads to further and further problems. And the problems are called otitis media. Oto, ear, itis, inflammation, media, middle. When you've got that continued negative air pressure, the mucosal lining of the middle ear space begins to rebel, and it secretes a fluid. And the fluid is like the fluid under the skin of a blister. It's clear. And this fluid is often called serous, S-E-R-O-U-S, serous. Serous fluid is not infectious, just like the clear fluid under a blister. But the eardrum begins now to bulge out. It used to be sucked in due to a vacuum. Now it's bulging out. And then later on, that clear fluid becomes infected. Now it becomes white. And now you've got an advanced stage of otitis media, often accompanied by otalgia. Oto, ear, algia, pain, ear pain, called an earache. Okay? So otitis media is the most common pathology of the middle ear. It begins with a vacuum. It actually begins with a sore throat and swollen tonsils. And when the tonsils are swollen, the Eustachian tube won't open very well. Now you've got a vacuum in the middle ear space, and now for sure the Eustachian tube won't open because there's a vacuum here. And when you swallow or yawn, that Eustachian tube will not open. And then the vacuum becomes replaced by serous fluid, because the skin, the mucosal lining, secretes that, and now the middle ear bulges, the eardrum bulges, and then the serous fluid turns white, and now it's pus. Okay, you need to get medical attention there because we've got problems. Okay, I'll stop sharing for a second, and what we'll do now is we'll follow our notes and see where we were there. Sharing screen, let me get out of here. Okay, have a look. We covered all the pieces and parts of the middle ear yesterday, or last week I should say. All these, the closed space area, the mucosal lining. We said that the jugular vein and the carotid artery both pass very near the middle ear space. We said that the Otitis ad antrum is the space or area above the incus and the stapes. We said that the epitympanic recess is the area just above the eardrum and the malleus. So let's look. Epitympanic recess, Otitis ad antrum. Okay, so in anatomy, even spaces are given names. Then we mentioned the chordotympany nerve is a branch of the seventh facial nerve that passes through middle ear space. Not in this particular picture, it doesn't show that. We said that the inner ear wall is the medial half of the closed middle ear space. medial meaning more toward the center of the head, medial here, and it contains the oval window, promontory, round window. Okay? These are all the pieces and parts. Eustachian tube we covered last week. Then we highlighted that italicized sentence there at the bottom. Air pressure has got to be even, Steven, on both sides of the eardrum for the middle ear to work optimally. The middle ear mucosal lining absorbs oxygen. The Eustachian tube normally alleviates this negative air pressure by supplying the middle ear with new air. The middle ear muscles know the basic shapes and the basic landmarks of the middle ear ossicles. Always think of the ossicles as the bones, and remember they work as a unit, not individually. The middle ear muscles we covered last week as well. The stapedius muscle goes from the back wall of the middle ear space to the neck of the stapes. It is innervated by the 7th cranial nerve. It is the strongest of the two muscles. The tensor tympani muscle is larger but weaker. Okay, wondering if we have some pictures of that. We might, maybe yes, maybe no, maybe rain, maybe snow. Okay, your textbook does, but I'm not showing them here that much. But nonetheless, let's see. Your textbook has really good views, actually, of the middle ear muscles. But here's a picture of the tensor tympani muscle attached to the manubrium of the malleus. And here's a picture of a tendon of the stapedius muscle, which is attached to the neck of the stapes. Okay, so basically this shot is showing you the two muscles themselves. This is showing you a schematic once again. Again, this would be the tensor tympani muscle, the stapedius muscle, and this weird looking spider web thing here. You can think of that as a ligament. Okay, short process, long process, manubrium of the malleus, hammer of the malleus, neck of the stapes, crura, stapes footplate, oval window, promontory, round window, Eustachian tube. Basically the pieces and parts. This picture is showing you again various ligaments, ligament. This would be the tensor tympani muscle. This would be the stapedius muscle showing you here. So not bad, you're getting some pictures. Now we get into middle ear physiology, and this is where we finished last week. And very important, once again, air pressure has to be even on both sides of the tympanic membrane for the middle ear to do its job. Now here, underline the word transduces, because that's a big word in our field. Transduce means to change energy from one form to another form. And we said last week, a microphone transduces sound into electricity along the wire that's attached to it. A speaker takes electricity and it transduces that electricity back into sound. So in a weird way, a microphone is a backward speaker and a speaker is a backward mic. And guess what? Hearing aids have a microphone and a speaker. So hearing aids have two transducers. Okay, your middle ear is a transducer. And what does it do? It changes sound waves into mechanical energy by way of movement of the ossicles. So now sound waves hitting the drum are changed into mechanical energy. And this mechanical energy is sent on to the inner ear. And the inner ear transduces mechanical energy into hydraulic fluid energy. And then the hair cells inside the cochlea, they transduce hydraulic or fluid energy into electrical energy. And the electrical energy is sent up the 8th nerve to the brain. So reading it once again, Okay, middle ear transduces sound energy into mechanical energy. The cochlea changes mechanical energy into hydraulic or fluid movement, and the hair cells inside the cochlea transduce that fluid movement into electricity. And that is sent up the 8th nerve to the brain. Cool, huh? All right, go over to the notes and read with me. That's one thing that the middle ear does. Okay, so put a star by right there. The other thing is the middle ear overcomes the impedance mismatch as sound goes from air to the fluid of the cochlea. What does that mean? And last week I think I had you put your hand against your face. And this morning I had you do that as well. And pressure is force over an area. And when you look at this slide here, look at the size of the eardrum compared to the size of the footplate of the stapes. So as sound hits this eardrum, okay, look at the force over a big area is converged onto a small area. The force against your hand, so to speak, is changed to the force put on your fingertip. And guess what you've just done? You have increased the sound pressure level. See how acoustics and anatomy are tied together? The middle ear increases the sound pressure level because of the different sizes of the eardrum relative to the footplate of the stapes. Force upon this large area is converged into the same force onto a smaller area. Pressure is force over an area. So the main thing that the middle ear does is it increases the pressure of sound. Why does it need to do that? It needs to do that because airborne sound has to activate a fluid-filled cochlea. And we said last week, if you're swimming under the water and your head is under the water and I'm standing at the outside of the pool talking to you, you're not going to hear a word I say because my voice is going to bounce off of the water. Airborne sound can't get into the water. Why? Because the water offers impedance. Air, I can move. Look at my hand move through the air. But what happens when you do a belly flop? It hurts. Okay, because guess what? You land flat on the water, and water is harder than air. So when you land on the water, it hurts. So airborne sound is going to have a tendency to bounce off of the water. And that's exactly what would happen if you didn't have a middle ear. Airborne sound would hit a fluid-filled cochlea and bounce right off. Something has to help airborne sound activate the fluid-filled cochlea. And that something is the middle ear. All right, let's look at how it does that. It does that in 3 main ways. The main way in which it does that. Okay, and here I'm describing about the pool and someone standing at the outside of the pool and blah, 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 blah. So how does it do that? It does that in 3 ways. Right here. 1, 2, and 3. Let's put those into action. We'll look at the words, look at the PowerPoint slides. Middle ear increases the sound pressure level of airborne sound so that it can activate a fluid-filled cochlea. So this is all the middle ear. The cochlea is filled with fluid. What are these guys? Those are your balance organs. We'll cover that later. So anyway, you're looking at the 3 ways in which it does so. I put a 1, 2, and 3. Let's look at 1 first. Size of the eardrum compared to size of the stapes. So 1 and 1. Read with me here. The tympanic membrane is larger than the footplate of the stapes. How much larger? 17 times larger. The second way, number 2. This is an interesting way. 2, look at this length here, and look at this length here. Which one's longer? Okay, just for fun. Have you ever watched a flock of geese flying over and they are in a V formation? You ever wonder why one line of the V is longer than the other one? It's got more geese in it. Just thought I'd tell you. No. So basically, though, when you're looking at a teeter-totter or a seesaw with a kid, okay, you're going to give the kid the longer end to give him the advantage because he's smaller. Let's see if I got a picture of it. That's pressure. This one here is force over an area. So this is number one. Eardrum is 17 times larger than the stapes footplate. So here's your eardrum, tympanic membrane, and you've increased the pressure because you put it onto a smaller area. Footplate of the stapes in the oval window. And that's that picture. But then there's this leverage thing. Look at how the manubrium and the malleus bone is a little bit longer than the incus. And think of an axis or a fulcrum running right through here, the axis. So when you think, here's the real thing. Think of the axis running right through here. When you have a teeter-totter, you're going to give the kid the longer end. You're going to take the short end because the longer end has the advantage. Just like when you're trying to raise something heavy, you can do it with a lever. If you've got the long handle, I can lift the heavy thing at the end. Here's the fulcrum, like a teeter-totter or a seesaw. If it's even length, I'm going to have to exert a whole lot more pressure to lift this. If I've got a longer length, I don't have to exert as much pressure. So the leverage action of the ossicles is like a teeter-totter or a seesaw, okay? The incus is a little bit shorter than the malleus. And so think of the axis as twisting here. In other words, if you look at my arms here, okay, think of one as the malleus, and here this is the incus. And think of this as that fulcrum. Okay, so think of the stapes as being stuck on the end of my elbow, like a little horseshoe. So the malleus is a little bit longer than the incus, and like a connection. Okay, because this one's longer than this one, you get a bit of an advantage. They call that the leverage action of the middle ear ossicles. That also helps to increase the pressure of sound. So now you've got two things. Okay. Good. That's the second one. And the third thing is that the eardrum does not move as a uniform thing. Here's your eardrum. Here's the eardrum, umbel, and the annulus, you know, the ring around the eardrum that keeps it in place. So you're looking at it from the side here. Due to its conical shape, the tympanic membrane buckles as it vibrates, the dashed lines. And this doubles the movement of the malleus. So you've got the three things: size of the eardrum relative to size of the footplate of the stapes. Secondly, the leverage action of the middle ear ossicles. And thirdly, the buckling action of the eardrum. You take those three things together. In summary, look at the slide here, and let's do the math. Eardrum to stapes size, 17:1. The leverage action increases the pressure 1.3 to 1. And the buckling action of the eardrum increases the pressure by 2 to 1. And you multiply that all together, and what do you get? A 44 to 1 pressure increase. Now, remember that these numbers are all memorizable. So memorize these numbers, serious as a heart attack, because guess what? It relates to exactly what we covered this morning in 110. Remember we talked about pressure, and we called pressure dynes per centimeter squared, and we said that we can relate that to the decibel. Okay, let's do it. I'll show you what. Look what the middle ear does. The middle ear increases the pressure by a total factor of 44 to 1, because you're taking all these three elements, you multiply them all together, a 44 to 1 pressure increase. So look what happens. Here's the graph you saw this morning in acoustics. If I increase the pressure, I'm going to make it larger here. If I increase the pressure by 10, okay, how many decibels did I go up? 20. If I would increase the pressure by 100-fold, I'd go up by 40 dB. Right? We covered that a little bit more than an hour ago. The middle ear increases the pressure by 44 to 1. So that's somewhere between 10 and 100, isn't it? 44 sits somewhere between 10 and 100. So the pressure increase that you're going to get, if you did the math, which we won't, the pressure increase we're going to get is around 30 to 35 dB. About. So the middle ear increases the sound pressure by about 30 to 35 dB. Why? Because it gives a pressure increase of 44 to 1, which corresponds to a 30 to 35 decibel increase. So essentially, when you're thinking about this here, let's go to here. Now we will, what's the net effect of that? Well, the Rene tuning fork test. If you took a tuning fork, and I keep saying I'm going to bring them home from work, and I never do. So now I'm going to just show you a tuning fork. Okay? Stop sharing screen. Show you a picture of a tuning fork. And let's say I took this. They're usually about the size of my pen, a little bit bigger, has two things sticking out of the end of it, okay? And let's say I took that tuning fork and went, boom. Now put your finger behind your ear, feel the bone, and that bone is called the mastoid bone. So if I took a tuning fork and went, boom, and placed it against the mastoid bone, you'd hear it. But if I took the tuning fork away and held it here, whoa, it would be way louder. How come? Because you are hearing it by air conduction. Bone conduction, air conduction. Ding the tuning fork, hold it against the bone. Yep, you're vibrating the bone, which is going to vibrate the cochlea, which is going to vibrate the fluid, and the hair cells will send info to the brain. Yep, you're going to hear a sound. But if I hold it here, the sound is going in your ear canal, and it's got the added advantage of your middle ear. You got the middle ear working now. The eardrum relative to the footplate of the stapes, the leverage action, the buckling action, all that increase in the sound pressure by about 30 to 35 dB. So a tuning fork, boom, you'll hear it here, but you're going to hear it about 30 to 35 dB louder when you hold it by the ear. And try that next time. It'll blow your mind, okay? Air-conducted sound is going to be louder than bone-conducted sound. And why? Because of your middle ear. So in physiology, in other words, what does it do? Okay? The middle ear does two things. Transduces sound waves into mechanical energy, and secondly, overcomes the impedance mismatch between air and fluid. And how does it overcome the impedance mismatch? By increasing the pressure by 30 to 35 dB. Now, airborne sound can, C-A-N, can activate a fluid-filled cochlea. So when you think about it, and even think in terms of good old evolution or something, I mean, imagine if you go up the page here, look what it's, whoa, go up, 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 Ted, up, 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 okay? Everything is for a reason, okay? The middle ear is what gives mammals like us exceptional hearing. It's much better hearing sensitivity we have than in reptiles, birds, and other animals. Who knows, maybe this is what helped the little rodent-like mammals escape the dinosaurs. Because dinosaurs were big lizards, and they didn't have middle ears. They had an eardrum, and they had a cochlea, but they didn't have a middle ear. So they couldn't hear very well. And this is an important consideration to think about. Back to this Rene tuning fork test. This is one test that is done often by physicians. Okay? It's one of several types of tuning fork tests that you will be learning. Tuning fork tests are very good at telling the difference between bone conduction and air conduction. Okay? They're very important tests to use. The Rene, memorize it, R-I-N-N-E, compares one's hearing by bone conduction and by air conduction. And what's a normal finding on the Rene tuning fork test? Air conduction is heard louder than bone conduction. And for whom will this occur? If you have normal hearing or if you have old age hearing loss. Because old age hearing loss is due to damage of the inner ear, not the middle ear. So only people who have middle ear pathology will have an abnormal finding on the Rene test. For whom will air conduction not sound louder than bone conduction? For children with otitis media. Okay, for the person with a conductive hearing loss. Always remember, break down hearing loss into two types, conductive and sensorineural. Conductive hearing loss means sound can't get conducted to where it's got to go. Sensorineural loss, there's no problem with the conduction, there's no wax in the ear, there's nothing wrong with the middle ear, both of those are working like 60. Good. The problem is in the inner ear. Oh, the hair cells are damaged. Well, guess what? Even for those people, air conduction is going to sound louder than bone conduction. So memorize this fact. It's very important. You will encounter it again in future studies in this program. So very important. Put a star by Rene tuning fork test. Make sure you know the three contributions to how the middle ear overcomes the impedance mismatch. Very important, okay? First, eardrum size. Second, the leverage action. Third, the buckling action. And the total pressure increase is 44 to 1. I don't know why I've got 44 to 2. That doesn't make any sense. Combined effects increase the oval window with an SPL by a pressure increase of 44 to 1. Okay, that 2 is a mistake there. And then recall from acoustics course. If you've increased the pressure by a factor of 10, you go up by 20 dB. Increase the pressure by a factor of 100, you go up by 40. 44 to 1 is about somewhere between 10 and 100. So basically, it'll work out to about somewhere between 30 to 35 dB. And the Rene tuning fork demonstrates this. The Rene tuning fork test is an eloquent demonstration of how the middle ear overcomes the impedance mismatch. Okay, now, if you take a child, so you would think, one would think, so we've got that all straight here, one would think then that the biggest amount of hearing loss that you can have due to middle ear pathology would be about 30 to 35 dB, because that's what the middle ear adds. So middle ear pathology can result in a 30 to 35 decibel hearing loss. The truth of the matter is, middle ear pathology can cause more than 30 to 35 dB hearing loss, more than what the middle ear makes up, and here's why. So let's look at this now. Here's why. Share screen, show picture, see what we've got here. There you go. Question, here you go. If the middle ear normally makes up some 30 to 35 decibels, then why can a conductive hearing loss often be greater than 30 to 35? And the answer is this. normally. The oval window indents and the round window bulges. Remember, we described that earlier. That's normal. But what happens if the oval window can't push in and the round window can't bulge out? Okay? What happens if you've lost that trade-off? And what's going to cause a loss of that trade-off? Read with me. The middle ear directs energy to the stapes bone. Okay, the oval window pushed inwards would bulge out the round window. And if you pushed on the round window, you'd bulge out the oval window. There's a trade-off. Energy to the oval and round windows at the same time, however, you lose that interaction. So think about this as an example. Let's say we went to the middle ear. Let's just say we took out the ossicles and we took out the eardrum. Sound would hit the oval window and round windows at the same time, wouldn't it? The middle ear makes it so that sound is only activating the oval window, which in turn bulges the round window. But if you took out the entire middle ear, sound would hit the oval and round windows at the same time. You wouldn't have that interaction. There's another thing that can cause a problem here, okay? Fluid-filled middle ear with otitis media. Look, slide number 1. Imagine this entire space is filled with pus. Okay, you've got the vacuum you had, and then it filled with serous fluid, and then that got infected, and now it's white. So now the whole middle ear space, and look at my face now, is bulged. The eardrum is no longer sucked in. Now the eardrum is it's bulged out, much like we showed you pictures a couple of weeks ago when we looked at the inflamed outer ear. And we looked at all kinds of these pictures, and we looked at the outer ear, and I showed you what the eardrums can look like. Well, sometimes you'll see that really pussed, and you know what, just for fun, I think I may end up showing you, just for fun. Bear with me, because what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to pull up that PowerPoint so we can see it. Outer ear anatomy and physiology. I'm going to pull up that PowerPoint so you get a real healthy imagination of what this looks like. I'm going to go way down to the end. Okay, we'll go up a touch over here. There you go. There you go. There's a bulged eardrum. Okay, so look at this sucker. It's completely pus-filled. You're looking at the eardrum from the outside. A normal eardrum. Ooh, all those weird pictures, hey? Okay, a normal eardrum should look like this when you're looking at it. And when you've got you get otitis media, you get a problem. A bulged eardrum, now it's sticking out. Okay? And another bulged acute otitis media. Okay, bulged eardrum, so it's sticking out. You're starting to get it, but basically, okay. So you've seen that. Now we go to our slide for today. So think of this whole middle ear space as filled with pus. So now your eardrum, follow my cursor, is bulged out. If you've got that, guess what? You have lost that love and feeling, that you have lost that interaction. You've lost that interplay between the oval and the round window. When one pushes in, the other can't push out because of the pus all filling this area. It's not going to allow the round window to bulge. So those who indulge bulge. You have lost that interactive trade action here. Okay, so if the round window cannot bulge, the oval window cannot push in. Reading the next slide. The interaction is gone. The cochlea will no longer be activated by 30 to 35 dB inputs. Conductive hearing loss can therefore be 60 decibels. Now this TDH39 means a set of headphones. That's headphones that fit over the ear. They're called circumoral headphones. Okay, that's what that TDH39. So what can make this happen? Various middle ear pathologies. For example, missing ossicles or fluid-filled middle ear. So, oh, here's a picture of your stapedius muscle out of your textbook. I did have it after all. I didn't think I did. Okay, here's a picture of your tensor tympani muscle out of your Lass and Woodford textbook, the same book you use for acoustics. I really like that book. It's got a lot of information that they just describe in English. I really like. I think it's a great book. So anyway, there you go. The energy, action, and also now your middle ear has resonances. So if I go to the home slide here, you know how we described earlier, a couple of weeks ago, we said that the outer ear and its shape and the ear canal, like a wine glass at Christmas, have a resonance, right? Mass and stiffness, quarter wave resonator, all that jazz. Well, guess what? Your middle ear also has resonances. And the middle ears actually resonate mostly at 2000 hertz. The resonance of the middle ear ossicles, the resonance of these ossicles is 2000 hertz. And the resonances of the middle ear space are around 900 hertz, 1100 hertz. Okay, it really hurts. Okay, so you've got several different resonances of the middle ear, and we'll stay at this particular slide. We'll move down now. The resonances, the middle ear has resonances of around 900 hertz, 1000 hertz, 2000 hertz. So the outer ear has a resonance and the middle ear has a resonance. And look closely at this slide here. I'll push it closer. Okay, we'll push it closer. The ear canal and eardrum have a resonance of around 2,000 to 3,000 hertz. The concha bowl of the outer ear has a resonance of around 5,000 to 6,000 hertz. You take those two resonances and you put them together, you've got a resonance of between about 1,500 hertz to about 4,000 hertz in the outer ear canal. Middle ear has these resonances. You put those two together, middle ear resonance plus outer ear resonance, and you will get an equal to this. In plain English, this says, this curve represents the softest it takes to just barely hear all the different frequencies. Remember when we talked this morning? And we said the softest it takes to hear a 1000 hertz tone at 1 meter distance from a speaker with 2 ears? Well, look, at our hearing gets even better at 2000 hertz even yet. And it's because of these resonances. Okay, so our hearing is unequal across the frequencies. Now this curve, this at 1000 hertz, this should be right at 0. But it isn't in this picture. You know why? Because this is showing you the sensitivity with 1 ear under a headphone, not with 2 ears in front of a speaker. If you looked at 2 ears in front of a speaker, you will see that 1000 hertz really is at 0. And the white curve over here, that really means 1 ear under a headphone. So essentially, now, I'm not seeing you people anymore. I'm not really sure why that is the case.
I can't see your notes.
Okay. I can't now. Can you see me now?
Yeah, I can see you, but I couldn't see your notes.
Okay. Odd that that's... How about now? Can you see them now or no?
No.
Okay. I'll tell you what. Let's go to here again. And I'll share screen. Let's try that. Maybe that would be nice. Can you see?
There we go.
All right, Houston, we're back on the landing. Okay, here is, let's go to here. Here's the resonances of your outer ear or your middle ear that we just described. And I'll show you an earlier slide here. Resonances of your middle ear ossicles and the middle ear space. The middle ear ossicles resonate around 2,000 hertz. The middle ear space resonates around 900 hertz, 1100 hertz. So generally, this shows you the added, see the pressure gain of the middle ear. And then you've got the outer ear canal resonances. We said earlier, a couple of weeks ago, the outer ear canal resonates around 3,000 hertz, something like that, and the concha bowl resonates around 5,000 to 6,000 hertz. You put these two together, you got the overall total outer ear canal resonance, which favors the pickup of the high frequency consonants of speech. So the total outer ear resonance is around 3,000 hertz, something like that. Okay, you take this outer ear resonance, add it to the middle ear resonance, you get this. And look at our hearing sensitivity is the best actually at 2,000 hertz. It's because of all this. And when you go to the next slide, you'll see the yellow curve. And look at what we talked about this morning. What was the softest it took to hear a 1,000 hertz tone at 1 meter distance from a speaker with 2 ears? We called that 0 decibels SPL. If we played that same game at 2,000 hertz, look at that, you'd need even less. So it means our ears are better at 2,000 hertz. See where this goes down? That's the sweet spot of your hearing. The sweetest spot, and that's right where the high frequency consonants of speech reside. So you can see that the outer and the middle ears really serve, due to their resonances, to increase our hearing sensitivity at these high frequencies especially. Now this MAF, we'll cover that way later on when we cover psychoacoustics, okay, in 110. But that just means minimal audible field. Just think MAF, you can circle that or whatever. That just means the softest it takes to hear all the different frequencies with 2 ears in front of a speaker. The white curve is showing you what's happening with 1 ear under a headphone. And remember, 2 ears are better than 1. So 2 ears are more sensitive than only 1 ear. And you'll wonder what that little bump is here. What is this bump here? Well, you've plugged up the ear with a headphone. So as soon as you plugged up the ear with a headphone, you've lost the outer ear canal resonance because you plugged it up. So you've lost a bit there. But at any rate, we'll cover that way more later on. For now, let's go to the notes here. Okay, maximum conductive hearing loss. We described why it can be more than 25 to 30 decibels. Okay, we've discussed why this is. This is just giving it to you in the notes. We showed you in the PowerPoint. Okay. Don't worry so much about here. The maximum conductive hearing loss. This, when you see air-bone gap, just think conductive hearing loss. Okay, just write conductive. Maximum conductive hearing loss is about 60 decibels if you're wearing round the ear circumaural headphones. Okay, and the maximum conductive hearing loss is even 70 to 80 decibels if you are using what's called insert headphones with those little yellow tips that fit inside of your ear. So actually the maximum conductive hearing loss depends on the headphone used to measure the hearing, but the point to take home here is the maximum conductive hearing loss is more than what the middle ear adds up. It can be more than 25 to 30. And how come? Because you've lost that interaction between the oval and round windows. And how did you lose it? Because you had a pus-filled middle ear, which prevented the oval from pushing in and the round bulging out. Then we covered the resonances of the middle ear. The resonance of the middle ear ossicles is 2,000 hertz. You have 2 other little resonant frequencies around 900 and 1,200 hertz, something like that. So the resonance is summary. The middle ear adds about 25 to 30 dB, actually about 30 to 35, especially between 500 and 5,000 hertz. The outer ear adds about 25 to 20 dB between 1500 and 4000 hertz. And recall from acoustics, and you'll get this more when we cover psychoacoustics, together these give rise to the human hearing loudness curve. Human hearing loudness curve. There's the curves, showing you that our ears are more sensitive at some frequencies than at others. And this is due to the resonances of the outer and the middle ears. We will cover more of this in other courses as we move on. But then I'm giving you this introduction now because after the midterm, when we cover psychoacoustics in 110, we will be revisiting this very same slide. Okay, so this was just your first pass at it. Okay, very good. I'm glad we've got an extra time in anatomy course. We will work on more of the middle ear next week. Next week we're going to be more into what is called the acoustic reflexes. We're going to talk about the action of the tensor tympani muscles and the stapedius muscle. And those two muscles working together are called a reflex. What is a reflex? A reflex means, can you still see me okay? I just want to make sure we're on the page. Good. A reflex means you didn't have any control over the action. In other words, if you have, let's say you have your legs crossed and the physician taps your knee and your foot shoots out, that's a reflex. A reflex means you didn't think about it. Let's say you touched a hot stove and you went, ugh! Okay? You didn't think about it. The message never reached your brain. You didn't go, the stove is very hot, and if I do not remove my hand, it will burn. No, like a reflex, you pulled your hand away. Reflexes are involuntary. Reflexes happen without you thinking about it. Reflexes do not involve this part of the brain. Reflexes only involve the brain stem. What is the brain stem? The spinal cord inside your head. Okay? Reflexes do not go up to your cortex of your brain. Your cortex of the brain, inside your skull here, that's your thinking area. That's where you're thinking and your emotions and your colors and all life and all that crap. Reflexes don't reach the brain. So an acoustic reflex means, how did these muscles pull and you have no control over it? It just happens. And what causes the acoustic reflex? This is really cool. Check this out. What causes it? Loud sounds. Loud sounds cause the acoustic reflex. Now, stop for a second and we'll take no notes, as we won't even look at them. Do you like the sound of your voice on a recording? I think we've asked this last week. Hell no. I don't like the sound of my voice on a recording, and yet when other people listen to it, okay, they say, no, that sounds exactly like you. You're the only one that doesn't like it. How come? Because when you hear your voice on a recording, you are only hearing yourself through air conduction. You're not hearing yourself through bone conduction. When you talk, however, when you yourself talk, okay, you are hearing yourself through the bones of your skull, but you're also hearing yourself through the air. So other people may hear you at about 65 decibels. You hear yourself at about 85. Did you know that? So average speech is about 65 dB SPL. Average conversational speech. My father can beat your father at checkers. Your mother wears army boots. Yakety, 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 yak. Normal average conversational speech. What's its intensity? About 65. Okay. How loud do you hear yourself? About 85. That's enough to cause the acoustic reflex. So why do you have the acoustic reflex? Because when those muscles pull, they stiffen your eardrum, and they pull the stapes out of the oval window. In other words, the retraction of those muscles makes your middle ear work less well. Anytime those muscles are pulling, your middle ear isn't working quite as well, because the tensor tympani pulls the eardrum in, and the stapedius muscle pulls the stapes out. So when you've got the action of that acoustic reflex, you've got a temporary reduction of middle ear function. The acoustic reflex retards or makes the middle ear work more poorly. So anytime those muscles are pulling, you're making the middle ear work more poorly. Why would you want that to happen? To dull the loudness of your own voice while you talk. Weird, huh? I think this stuff is just a trip. They also act as a natural protection against loud sounds. They cause the middle ear, anytime so loud sounds coming into the ear cause the acoustic reflex. And which loud sounds? Mostly low pitch loud sounds. And which are the loudest parts of speech? The vowels. And where do the vowels come from? Your throat. A, E, A, U, all those are the loudest parts of speech. Those are louder and lower. Because when you compare S, it's a high pitch. Ah is a low pitch. Church, okay, ch is high pitch. Is low pitch. And is louder than ch. Okay, so it's the vowels that are the loudest parts of your speech, and it's the vowels that are low frequency compared to the consonants, and it's the loud vowels that cause the acoustic reflex. The acoustic reflex is meant, it's created, or we've evolved, or what have you. The acoustic reflex dulls the loudness mostly of low frequency sounds, and in speech, of course, that's the vowels, because vowels are louder than consonants. Basically, in a nutshell, the acoustic reflex makes your own speech softer while you yourself are talking. And why do you not like the recording of your voice? Because when you are listening to a recording, you sound more tinny. You sound a little bit less rich. You sound kind of ugly to you. It doesn't have that well-rounded, rich tone quality that you yourself hear. And that's because low frequencies resonate the mass of your skull. Bone conduction favors low frequency transmission. Your skull is mass. So you hear yourself louder and lower than you do on a recording. So all this is put together. So we'll start next week more on the acoustic reflex of the middle ear, and next week we'll finish the middle ear, and next week we will review some salient things that we need to know about the outer ear again. We'll finish off the middle ear, and then we'll look back a bit at the outer ear. So next week have both sets of notes handy with you, okay? Because we're ahead of time. This is a good thing. We have extra time in anatomy, and so we've got lots of good time so we can make sure we understand all the concepts. I will also next week be very open to questions from anybody that people have, the things that are unclear to you. Write them down and have them as questions to ask me next week. Okay? So next week we'll finish the middle ear and we'll do a bit of review. All right, I'm going to be done. I'm going to have something to eat. I'm going to grab a coffee. And yeah, cool. As we always say, live long and prosper. All right, adios.